Do you feel like you can't play real acoustic blues because finger picking is so hard? If so, I get it. And I've been teaching folks how to finger pick for well over a decade now, and I still hear things like that. And yes, there's a lot going on when you watch people like Kebmo or Justin Johnson pick through a blues tune, but here's what the last decade plus of teaching acoustic blues has taught me. You can play great blues at almost any skill level. It's the blues after all, not prog rock. It doesn't have to be fancy and it doesn't have to be technically difficult to get the point across. In today's lesson, I'll take you through an arrangement in the style of Key to the Highway. We're going to start with the basics and build up to just a little bit of flash. And by the end of the lesson, you'll have a blues arrangement that you can learn that fits your current level and gives you a little bit something to reach for. Plus, this is modeled after Brunsey, so it's going to sound really good. So let's dig in. Let's start with a basic version of the 8-bar progression from Key to the Highway. We're going to play this in the key of E, and all you really need here, finger picking wise, is just your thumb and index finger. No complex techniques required. Let's break this down into pieces that we can build on, starting with our 8-bar blues progression. Let's get used to the chord progression just using open position chords. We'll start with an E chord for a measure, and then B7 for a measure, and then A7 for 2 measures. That's the first 4 bars. For the next 4 bars, we start back on E, and then just change back and forth between E and B7. So this is bar 7 and then bar 8. Let's hear it with a count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. But in our arrangement, we're not going to use these open position chords, at least not exclusively. They might come up here and there, but let's do something different. Let's play our E chord here as a D shape. You might recognize that D chord. Let's just bring that up a whole step and play at the 4th, 5th, and 4th frets on strings 3, 2, and 1. Gives us a really nice E major chord. And in bar 2, we change to B7, but we don't want to just make that big jump. So instead of doing that big jump, what we can do is drop that E down to D sharp and bar at the 4th fret. Strings 4, 3, 2, and even 1, but on the first string, we want to play the A note to get this B7 sound. That's on the 5th fret. So everything barred at the 4th fret, but put that bar down to get a B7. Then we'll play our A7 just by dropping that shape down 2 frets. Right? And if we keep following the progression, we know we've got E here, B7 here, and then we could come back to E here, and B7, maybe we end here for a big moment. But I want you to see that we've got some options, both in the open position for this chord progression, and then also up here. All right, that takes care of the progression. Now let's give it that old school blues sound, and we can do this without any fancy finger picking techniques. For this arrangement, we're just going to use a simple thumb and index finger picking technique. Our first measure is over E, so we're going to play an E bass. That's the open 6th string, and we're just going to let that ring out. And of 1, we start setting up our chord here. We're going to do that by playing the 3rd string under the chord. And remember, this is our D shape, just moved up. So we're at the 4th fret, 3rd string, 5th fret, 2nd string, and 4th fret, 1st string. So 1 and 2. For 2, we start this rhythmic strumming with the index finger, and I'm brushing up through the top 2 strings here. Let's take a listen to the rhythm there. 1 and 2 and 3 and. That gives us a full beat left in the measure. And right on the end of 4, as the measure is about to end, I'm going to get out of this position and head up to the 6th fret on the 5th string as I transition into this B7. Let's listen to that. And you can see we've got that same idea. We got the bass going, and it just kind of dies out, and then we've got some brush ups. But this time, a little movement there as I reach up and play the B on the 1st string, 7th fret, while holding everything else down. A little pickup note to get us into A. As we do a similar move just from A7, but notice we didn't reach up and play that A note here for the long A. We could do that, but instead we let our melody work back and forth between the G and the F sharp. So you gotta have that bar nice and in place there to pull this off. Now we're in E again, so we're gonna start off by playing that open, and then we're headed back up to our E chord shape here, using this D as kind of our familiar chord shape. We're just moving that up. Same thing. And then we're into the turnaround, which we'll cover separately. But for now, let's strum our way through this. Notice that it's really made up of 2 techniques. We're playing with the bass, letting it ring, very minimal thumb picking going on here, and then brush ups for some nice low and high sounds. But what about that bluesy turnaround? We can level up the picking just a touch here to pinch our way through the final 2 measures of the progression. Let's take a look at this. We start this turnaround with the open 6th string ringing out, and then we're going to play our E chord here, the 4th, 5th, and 4th frets, strings 3, 2, and 1. Now what we do is play the bass, and then on the and of 1, play the 3rd string from the chord. Then we're at B2, we're going to do one of those brush ups through the top 2 strings with the index finger. Beat 3, we're going to change positions and play the top part of the E major chord, top 3 strings. And we're going to play the 3rd string with the thumb, and at the same time we're going to do that same brush up move with the index finger. So we get all 3 notes ringing, right? Thumb picks downward, and then the index finger brushes upward. Then we're going to do that same picking move as we briefly visit the top part of a B7 here. That's putting down on the 3rd string, 2nd fret, open 2nd, and then 2nd fret, 1st string. Kind of a slick little way to play the top part of a B7. You can see it here in the full chord. We're just going to play it here. Again, that same picking motion, then back to the E, but just brush up through the top 2 strings as we get ready to do this little walk down into our full B7 chord. Start on the E, 4th string, 2nd fret, and then down to the D sharp, and that's really where we need to get into our full chord. is we're going to strum through the top of it. Strum again, and then a light brush up through the open strings as you're changing chords. So this is what we have. Once you've mastered this turnaround, you're likely ready for the next step. Now that we've got the basic arrangement under our fingers, let's ground this in a groove. And don't worry, we're going to keep the same chord progression, but we're going to really lay a solid foundation right underneath those changes that we've already been working for. Here's where we're going. Notice the pulse of the music was a little more front and center, and that has to do with the thumb's dead bass picking. And yeah, there was another trick or two thrown in there to keep things interesting, but we're going to get to that later. For now, let's focus on building that bass line underneath the chord changes. So far, our bass has just been plucked one time per measure, and it just kind of rings out until it fades as we do some brush ups through some chord tones on top. But now let's keep that bass thumping along and add something really cool to the sound. So we're going to play on the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And while I'm playing B7, that's going to be on the 4th string at the 4th fret there. And you'll see we'll move this down to A7, and we could even continue it in E as well, just shifting to the 6th string. But focusing on our B7 and A7, we could end up with something like this. Here's where things get fun. We're going to add a simple lead-in lick that you've probably heard a bunch of times before. It's just one of these signature moves that just sounds like the blues. It's a great way to pull yourself into a chord change. Let's take a look. This slide move actually starts before the beat, so it's kind of a pickup note, and it's a great way to move the progression forward, sliding into this chord. Now, let's take our B7 as our target chord. That's what we're changing into. We're going to start the slide from the 4th fret and slide up to the 6th. It's a pretty quick slide though. And then for the downbeat, when we're ready to be fully into the B7 chord, we'll play that 4th string, 4th fret note. And then continue with whatever we're playing over B7. It's just a snappy way to get into it. And we can take that same pattern and move it down into A. We're just sliding from the 2nd up to the 4th, and then using the 4th string 2nd as our bass. Now that we've got our bass fill in place, let's look at what we can do while holding down a couple of long stretched out chord shapes. We can add some real melody over the chords. Let's take a look at it in B and in A. Earlier we talked about the importance of having a good bar across the top 4 strings when playing your B7 and A7 shapes like this. The reason is we get 3 notes along the 1st string to work with, but we don't just have to brush up through those notes, which sounds really good, but we can also level up the flash here by pulling off from the flat 7 under the bar like this. Now we don't let it hang like that. We want to continue a lick. It might sound like this. And notice that pull off. It's kind of quick. It's actually a triplet that we finish up on that bass note. Triplet. right? Come back and work down. Do the same thing over A7. And you've got a really nice set of licks that sounds a little fancier than just picking it straight. All right, now we're getting somewhere. So let's turn up the heat on the finger picking just a little bit and see what we can do. We can add just a touch of flash here and there to the arrangement to really challenge you as a player and also round out the sound. In this arrangement, we do that a little bit over the B and the A chords and in the turnaround. So let's take a look at these parts, starting with the turnaround. The end of the turnaround, where we get to our B7 and pull off from the E down to the D sharp, step into our full B7 chord, is the same as what we covered earlier. So let's focus on what we did over the E measure. I've got this little sliding position on the fretboard that I'm going to hold through most of the measure. I've got my ring finger on the first string, around the second fret, and then my middle finger on the second fret of the third string. And then we're going to slide into the fourth fret and then back down. I'm pinching those two strings as I do the slide. And I weave in an open string in there to keep the melody moving. And then back up. And this is where we go into our B7 chord. One more time. All right, now here's something that will really open up your playing. Those classic licks using that long A shape. Watch how these notes just fall right on your fingers. And yeah, this can be a little bit tricky to get down and it requires some quick movements, but we're gonna take a closer look at it and hopefully this can be something that you can grow into to add that little flash to this arrangement. We've already talked about how this shape for B7 and A7 gives us 3 notes on the first string. The octave, the flat 7, and the note under the bar, and we added a little bit of flash here by pulling off from the flat 7 to the bar. And we did that over B7 and A7. But here, over A7, I want to take a second and switch up the picking here and get a little more intricate and come up with a lick like this. So did you hear how that had a little more single note sound versus all the brush ups? I switched my technique, which can be tricky to do in the middle of a progression, especially when you're doing a lot of brush ups. You kind of settle into that technique, but I'm switching to where I'm dedicating a finger to a single string here. You might do this differently, but I'm dedicating index finger to the third string, middle finger to the second, and ring finger to the first. That lets me do this pull off, plucking with my ring finger on my picking hand, and then I'm finishing up the triplet. So this is beat 2, 2 triplet with the second string. That's played by itself, right? I'm not doing the brush ups here. Then we go back to the octave down to the flat 7 before what I think is a really tricky move. It's just a triplet, but I'm picking up the flat 7, playing the bar at the second fret, and plucking the bass 4th string and the first string under the bar, so both at the second fret, back to that second string, second fret note, and then off for the open first string. When you play this at tempo, the challenge becomes getting out of the way so you can play that open first string on your way to the chord change. When you do this, you'll have it sounding like this. If you're a premium member, then you're going to get access to a slow note-for-note tutorial on the second example. We're going to do that a little bit later the week this lesson goes live. And if you're not a premium member, you can find out how to join us by clicking the link right over here or the link in the description. And I'll see you inside my BGI. Until then, practice smart and play on.